it's not just like I think this, it's also the science behind it. Otherwise we can actually be like stymieing our kids' development and putting them into spaces where then they struggle with attention issues. So I'm reading Anxious Generation, a very good book if you haven't had a chance to read it yet. And it's talking about the two major mental health illnesses plaguing young people, specifically Gen Z, people born after, I think it's 1995. So kids 96 on are considered Gen Z. They're experiencing higher rates of anxiety, depression. If you're new here, I'm Carla, and this is
Eric.
Welcome to Flourish and Dwell, where we share intentional parenting tips, healthy homemaking hacks, and wholesome homeschooling tips that help your home thrive. Eric and I, both having been in education as millennials, working with Gen Zers, we definitely have seen what this looks like in an academic setting, in a classroom setting. For myself, being a school counselor, I certainly see it in my office as far as what it means for that young person as they're going through the world and how it does affect them social, emotionally. And so when we came into the season of parenthood, we decided we're going to make very intentional decisions about how we're going to raise our kids. And one of the things, Anxious Generation, this book that I'm reading, thank you to my mother-in-law who gifted it to me. It's basically talking about how technology has significantly shifted not only how children experience childhood, where most people my age or older experience childhood through play with peers, synchronous play with peers, in person, in the flesh. A lot of young people today don't. It's not uncommon to encounter a young person whose social strata outside of like school is through like gaming or social media. That is not uncommon at all. And so as we kind of went from educators and these theoretical goods for young people to becoming parents, and Christian parents at that, we have made very intentional decisions about how we engage with screens and technology, I guess kind of as a whole. We don't make the TV a regular part of our home. We have one TV, one solo TV. It has been good to us. We do watch TV as a family, but our kids do not just go and pick up the remote and put on whatever they want. They don't just grab the iPad, and we're the ones that get into it. So we thought, knowing that as our background, we wanted to share some of the way that our family engages with screens, namely how we do like TV time together. So we're gonna share not only some of the shows that we recommend for other families who might be similarly minded, who maybe are trying to just take more intentional steps with how to engage with screens and teaching our kids to be more conscientious. And we're gonna give you the breakdown for why.
I think general things to keep in mind when you're doing screen time with your children. The first one is, I don't know if this is what it's called, but like still motion cinematography, where the actors or characters are moving, but not
the backdrop is
not
still.
The backdrop. Yeah. So that slower pace is actually better for kids the younger they are. It's not as intense, and it's slower, which is good.
Yep.
The most prominent one that we watch is Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry's great because there's little, if any, dialogue, and then it's pretty safe as far as the humor is concerned, because it's like a cartoon cat, mouse. Even when they're like bonking each other on the head or what have you, it's more lighthearted than not.
For sure.
Other shows that we considered, but ended up not going through with,
like Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes.
We did not.
They can have very crude humor.
Yep.
And some things that may or may not go over a child's head as well.
But are suggestive.
And suggestive, yeah. So we just want to be careful of that. And that's not to say we just turn on the TV, put on Tom and Jerry, and then leave. Still very much thing we do together. And if there is something, which I don't think we've seen yet, then that's an opportunity to have conversations around, or even sometimes we might just have to skip an episode and just pick up on the next one.
Another show that we find that we watch together with the kids, oh my goodness, because I love for the cinematography and it is beautiful, is Planet Earth.
Yeah.
You know, oh, it's beautiful. But again, one of the things that we will also underscore is that when we watch TV, it is not, we generally do not just turn it on and walk away. Even if we let our kids watch Curious George, which is another show that we do let our kids watch. The kids love the books, they love the show. Yeah, it's generally a family event, but even if it isn't, like where I will put it on for the kids, it is something that I am tuned into. And it does require more intentionality as a parent, because I want to see what's going on, so that if there is this slip or this introduction into themes that I don't necessarily deem appropriate for my family, we can have that conversation. I can follow up after that episode, or even just pause it right there and just talk about it, so that our kids, we have a chance to engage them. Even for those shows that we think are safe, sometimes corporations, you know, will buy out these smaller brands that did really good, and then they will start to introduce things that were not part of the original that we were used to. So yeah, we definitely want to preface it with, we don't just walk away when our kids are like watching something. We don't do viewing through tablets. I think it's a little too easy to isolate in that way. We do let our kids play like games on the tablet, and this is like a super treat, and it's literally Khan Academy Kids or The Good and the Beautiful, because that's the curriculum we're using. So like,
not even once a week.
It's not even once a week. It's like maybe like, it's been a minute actually since we did that, so I don't even know if it's fair to mention that. Like, it's like we do it. Ooh, can you share that, son? What'd you say? Emerald Cooks. We love to do cooking shows together, specifically Emerald Cooks. It's through the Roku channel. That one hits special for me because my dad and I used to watch Emerald back in the days when he was on the Food Network. But we do like to watch Emerald Cooks together, and cooking shows. But that's like the one that I think that's the only one that we actually have done, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Even then, again, we're watching it with them.
It's like a thing we do together.
Yeah, because there has been an instance or two where we did have to skip an episode because of things that we did not deem appropriate
For our children, yeah.
For our children, yeah.
Or for us, yeah. Because if it's not appropriate for the kids, generally a good rule of thumb is probably not even necessarily appropriate for adults. But we have conditioned ourselves to think that as adults we are able to tolerate more. And yes, sure, there are themes that are more mature that are genuinely not appropriate for kids. But I think we've gotten to the point as a society where we think because it's for adults that it can be inappropriate.
Yeah.
You know. But Emerald Cooks is a good one. We love watching those things. And then what we've noticed is that it actually will then inspire us maybe that week, maybe that day. It really inspires us to then get in the kitchen and get like creative and fun. So that has been really cool. I remember the one time my parents were visiting and we were watching Emerald Cooks, and he was doing some like Louisiana style beans and rice. And that day my parents made some delicious beans and rice. I think that will always be like now seared into our mind, because that was what it was for me growing up too, for sure. So yeah, cooking shows specifically, we have watched Emerald Cooks and we really like it. And it's also not like that weird edgy competition that's like everyone's gonna be like rude to each other.
It actually shows you how to cook.
Yeah, he's like legit showing you how to cook. Another show or some show categories, I guess we could say, that we like to watch are like DIY, fixer-upper, aka HGTV. Okay. One of the things that we actually have intentionally, well, actually, it's kind of unintentional. Well, no, I think it was intentional. I feel like you're the one that definitely spearheaded us not just watching cartoons.
Kind of growing up, me and Carla, our parents made us watch real movies as opposed to cartoon movies. And I just remember at first, we were like, Mom, Dad, we don't want to watch this. And then like 15 minutes later, we're like
so sucked in.
At the edge of our seats, eyes wide open, you know, and nothing crazy, just like The Wizard of Oz or what's the music one?
The Sound of Music. Yes. They were often like older films, slower than what films were even when we were growing up. They were much slower. They required you to really like invest in the story and not the effects. And I think modern movies tend to do the opposite. They'll have you focus on the beauty of it through the effects and not the beauty in the story. So yeah, we try to do a good medley. We don't just like to do animated movies. The specific ones that we like to watch: Bargain Mansions, that's with Tamara Day. Love that show.
Good show.
Hometown with the Napiers. I really like them. Cute little winsome couple. Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna Gaines, of course. Huh? Yeah, they do have 4. Actually, they have 5 now, which is really cool.
Where We Call Home.
Where We Call Home. That one's really cool. That one's cool too because it's like each episode's like maybe 12 minutes, 10, 12 minutes. So it's not long. If you just wanted to like, you know, try something a little different. But it's really cool because it's basically this show where people take these unconventional spaces that we don't tend to think of being a house, and they just reimagine it, and they make them into homes. Like my favorite one is probably the treehouse one. It's like a school bus, and then it's also like a treehouse. The schoolhouse was also really cool. The barn, which was really cool because we found out that it's not too far from some of our families. Like we actually drove past it and we're like, man, that would be really cool. You know, and then come to find out it was actually like this house that's been reimagined. It was a barn. It's beautiful what they've done to it. How It's Made is another good show that literally talks about how different things are made. We watched one that was on honey recently, which is really cool. Mozzarella, like cheese. Some of it, like the old episodes are like old, like nobody uses that anymore. I'm pretty sure that's not how it's made now. But, you know, it's still a really cool show to work through, I'd say. And there's lots of episodes. I think it's really it's a good one also to weave in. If you do a little bit of homework with like homeschool, like unit studies, I think that would be a really cool thing to do too. So, yeah, those are some. And then, so How It's Made. And then What on Earth. This is me being a nerd. I make my kids watch shows that I watch. But What on Earth is really cool. It's basically like, yeah, they'll have all these, like you said, satellites, these different scientists, and they will literally view these things from an aerial view and kind of try to figure out what they're seeing. So they've really unearthed and found some pretty unique things. It's the first time I heard about cloud seeding was through What on Earth, which was literally this old time sort of war experiment where they literally took an airplane and released, I don't know if it was nitrogen or something like this up there to stir up clouds to rain. So it was kind of crazy.
Actually, the Russians did that during the Chernobyl disaster.
And it kind of backfired on them, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is that the one that backfired?
No, it didn't backfire. It was going to the capital, the radiation, because the winds was blowing.
Oh, yeah.
So they seeded around another area that was like farmland.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And if they were doing that then, you could only imagine what is being done now. But anyway, shows we'll consider in the future.
The
Chosen, oh yeah. We definitely would show the kids Chosen. But I think I'd want them to be a touch older because I really want it to like land.
Yeah.
Justice League,
yeah, and certain other superhero shows.
maybe like Batman circa like 1999. Yeah, like the ones that we grew up with.
Yeah. They're good, but they can be a little heavier.
For sure.
More mature themes.
Yeah, for sure.
Stuff like that. And I think as they get older too, like there's some things that the theme might be mature, but it's a good opportunity to talk through.
Yeah.
Not necessarily intentionally putting in front of them, but if it does happen, we're able to talk through it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think Justice League is a good one. Everything we're saying, well, these shows here that we're saying are like definitely Justice League, Batman. Those are very good animated series. I think that they had better stories than a lot of like animated shows do today. I think a lot of animated series now are like silly stuff. One of the things that I think the reason why we also are like, well, maybe we would watch something like that is because we realize that our boys are so drawn to like heroes and being the hero. I think it kind of speaks to cultivate in them those little poet warriors. When you lean into secular shows, like I think there's always an opportunity to talk about things, but again, that's why we would not do these things now. Chosen, maybe sooner than later.
Yeah.
So we kind of alluded to this before, but themes we avoid. We definitely avoid crude humor.
Yeah.
What else would you say we avoid?
Also, just lack of respect within like a family.
Yeah, poor family dynamics.
Yeah.
Unless there's like this sort of like redemptive aspect of it, especially with siblings, those sibling relationships where there's constantly like cynicism or sarcasm and disrespect, like kind of like this putting down of a specific family character where it's not ever redeemed in any way. Like we don't like to put those in front of our children. We're even reading like our oldest is reading through the Stink Moody books, which I thought was gonna be fine, but like as he's reading it, I'm like, I don't really like how his sister talks to him as a little brother. I think she's actually a brat. So we're probably not even gonna like finish that series. I just don't like. Yeah, I'm like, at what point are we gonna show her respecting her brother? With any media, books, shows, movies, music.
It's one example of where we do see that like a healthy relationship and like that kind of struggle with siblings, but not in a way that is outright disrespectful or what have you constantly. Granted, it's a book right now, but the Wing Feather Saga, there's a struggle there a little bit.
And that's natural. Yeah, I think it points to that without it being...
but not overly just like always combative towards one another or disrespectful in the way they talk to one another. We want our children to be respectful and kind to one another and to look out for one another, not always be trying to one-up one another.
Yeah. For sure. I think Wing Feather Saga is probably like one of the best modern examples of redeeming those struggles, right? Like, because, we know that our kids are not always going to get along as much as we would love for that to be the case. We know that that is not realistic because they're humans, but, we've got to find, like, we can't leave it there to where this is just how we treat each other. Like, we are very intentional about shows that portray healthy family dynamics. Yeah. I'd also say things that we're mindful of as far as themes is all categories of promiscuity, right? Like that's all under that same umbrella. All categories. Underscoring that. Because I know that we're gearing this towards parents, so you might have little ones listening, so you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying?
To the point, where even in, like we said, sometimes we have to skip certain HGTV shows.
And then, what's the big one?
Blurring the lines of like good and evil.
Yeah.
For instance, I think it's called Cruella.
Oh yeah, I think it is just called Cruella.
Yeah. So we actually, one of the few Disney movies we do like is 101 Dalmatians, the original cartoon.
Yeah.
and you could see a clear distinction between good and evil. Right?
Yeah.
To the point where Cruella de Vil, she's smoking, and there's like green clouds.
It's like gas coming out of her cigarette. Where you're like, that's bad for you.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. But in the movie Cruella, which is newer, you kind of see her origin story, if you will. But if you're not careful, there's like this empathy.
I want you to almost empathize with the villain, almost to the extent that you would find yourself, if you're not careful, excusing her deplorable behavior.
And justifying.
Yeah, and justifying it. Like, well, you know, well, her mom was so evil, of course she would. And so then instead of realizing, like, hey, no, she's still actively making choices that are evil and cruel. Like, literally, that's her whole name, Cruella de Vil. Cruel, yeah, you know. But it almost would make you want to not just empathize, but excuse evil behavior. And I think that that's a theme. Honestly speaking, you see it a lot with big brands like Disney, you know, which I think a lot of parents, if they're not careful, they can just think that these brands that were once upon a time kind of geared for kids, like, have our kids' best interest in mind. Like, we can let our guards down about those things because it's geared for kids, right? When in reality it's wrong. I think their movies in general more recently have really taken that bent of like blurring the lines between good and evil. I'm not talking about like character flaws, right? Like, the reason we love a good protagonist, you know, it's because they're flawed, right? But then they ultimately choose good, right? They overcome those things, or they choose good ultimately. But I think the thing that we are very mindful of in messaging in kids' movies or shows that we watch with our kids is like, what? Yeah, are they trying to justify evil?
Yeah, and so it can translate like from that movie they're watching to like how they are living out their lives.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's just a small nudge of deviance, it's still, you know, like
deviating. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that girl. She had that interview with Lecrae, and she was talking about how Lion King, which honestly was actually too intense for me as a kid, and I still don't do well with like intense themes. Like, it hurts here, but yeah, I could never get over the fact that man's daddy died. You know, y'all, like, his dad died. You know, like, that's trauma for real. And because he disobeyed his dad. I was like, oh, I'm wrecked. But anyway, I actually think, anyway, so she mentioned, she said that she by all intents and purposes was a witch. She was very much into the New Age and the occult, and what do they call it? Is that New Age? What is that? That whole like tarot cards and crystals, right? Stuff. Like mysticism, all of that kind of stuff, right? So she was very much into that, and she thinks back on it, and like one of the earliest things that she drew on that actually kind of opened her heart to any of that was watching Lion King. And she literally said that it was like, when you think of Rafiki the monkey, like, he was a literal witch doctor. That was his whole role in it, was like bringing the juju. I think sometimes we can dismiss the influence of children's movies and themes that are introduced in them. But this is a long video, and there's reasons why, right? To your point about like how much movement is in it, just to kind of help you guys, like, the more it has going on, y'all, I'm tired, as you can see, but the more it has going on as far as like, if the background is moving and the characters are moving and then they're singing and there's this brightness, like, we're actually encouraging shorter attention spans. So it's not just like I think this, it's also the science behind it. It's like, because there's all this different movement, what we don't realize is our brain is trying to track with all those things. And if we haven't helped our kids build longer attention spans, which is why slower content is better for early years. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the American Pediatric Association does not even recommend screens before 2. They might have lowered it to 18 months now, but like no screens before 18 to 2 years old, right? So, and that's because like we're trying to give kids a chance to actually be able to engage with a thing, like to see it and to process what's happening. Otherwise, we can actually be like stymieing our kids' development and putting them into spaces where then they struggle with attention issues, hence attention deficit disorders. So, you know, some of it is like not just biblical conviction, but then the other pieces of like the decisions that we're making with what we watch at this age. Our kids are, you know, 6 and under. Like, we are intentional about those things because we also are thinking about like their long-term development. As far as like how frequently, like,
yeah, I think we try to limit screen time to maybe like once, sometimes twice a week.
Weekends typically is when we would.
And
watch something together.
Definitely, like if we're watching a movie, sometimes, you know, we'll just watch the whole movie. But other than that, it might be like maybe an hour and a half, maybe. Like over 2 days.
Yeah, literally. We've actually broken up, like when we watched How to Train Your Dragon, which might have been a touch intense for our oldest one. But we broke that up over 2 days. We did like the first half, so maybe like 45 minutes the first day, and then we finished that movie up the second day. So you don't have to do it all in one. It could be like this event this weekend after we do our chores. You know, but yeah, for sure, we don't watch a ton at a time. The TV is not on most days. Hopefully you guys found nuggets in here that will be helpful for you as you decide how to lean into technology with your family. Hopefully we've given you not just recommendations that will be helpful, like just to know like where to start, but also recommendations for how to screen through the process. Because I think it can be intimidating, and I think a lot of people know the thing. Like we know, like, okay, kids are not supposed to watch too much TV. Okay, this, like, then what do you do? But we're actually also going to record things that we do as a family instead of watching TV, instead of engaging in screens. So if you're interested in that, then definitely stay tuned. And thanks so much for